Hey everyone, Tin Man here, and I am really excited to talk about the brand new heroes and alliances that will be coming to Dota Underlords in the big update coming soon. First, we've got the Healer Alliance, and the Healer Alliance requires 3 healers, and the healers are Enchantress, Mr. Warlock, the new unit Dazzle, Omni Knight, and Necrophos. And when you get 3 healers on your team, all friendly healing is amplified. Of course, we don't know specifics about the amount of amplification, and we also don't know right now whether or not the currently existing units like Enchantress, Mr. Warlock, Omni Knight, and Necrophos will lose any of their existing alliances in order to become a healer, or if they're going to maintain their current alliances. But regardless, we can start to speculate a little bit about how the Healer Alliance is going to be played. But first, let's talk about Dazzle, since he's the newest unit to this alliance. Dazzle is a troll healer. He's at tier 2, so he's a 2-cost unit. And his ability is Shadow Wave. He sends a bolt of power that arcs between allies, healing them while damaging any nearby enemies. So it'll bounce to your units, and then presumably do like an AoE just in the squares right around your allies. Kind of like an Omni Knight ult, but probably a much smaller, bouncing between all of your units. And so my first thought is that this immediately makes 4 trolls much more viable. Previously, you relied on getting Troll Warlord, who's a tier 5 unit, in order to complete the Troll Alliance. Now you've got another tier 2 troll, and there's 4 trolls between tier 1 and tier 2 now. You've got Bat Rider, Shadow Shaman, Witch Doctor, and Dazzle. So you should definitely see a lot more compositions trying to go for 4 troll builds earlier on in the game. And they can provide quite a bit of damage on their own, especially when paired with other strong DPS units. So one of the most interesting things that I see here is a build that does exactly that. It'll be a kind of 4 knights, 4 troll build, because you have got Omni Knight in the healer build, and typically knights, they want to play Necrophos as well. So you've already got 2 healers there in the most typical knights build, and most knights want to play trolls, because you have Bat Rider as a knight, you also kind of like Witch Doctor to go along with the Necrophos, and suddenly you can see, well, we've already got 3 of those 4 trolls if we also want to play Dazzle. That makes Shadow Shaman a natural inclusion. So I definitely foresee a lot of kind of mid-game knights compositions going for this kind of 4 trolls, 4 knights, 4 healers. Typically that will involve Omni Knight, Abaddon, because you want the Heartless with Necrophos, as well as Bat Rider for the troll, and then one other knight of your choice, typically Luna or Chaos Knight to be dealing damage in the early game, or possibly Dragon Knight if you get very late into the game and can also throw in a Dragon Alliance. Then you can pair it with 4 trolls, Dazzle, Shadow Shaman, Witch Doctor, and Bat Rider, like I said before. And then when you throw Necrophos, you get 3 healers, 4 trolls, and 4 knights. And that sounds like a very powerful build. It's got a lot of sustain, a lot of damage reduction. The damage output might be a touch low, but you do have the troll bonus. 4 trolls will make all your guys, even if they're just regular auto-attacking, will still do a bunch of damage over time. Not to mention tons of healing, so you'll win those long, drawn-out fights. So I'm very interested to see how that plays out. Of course, we don't know any of the numbers, the specifics, the balances on all of this stuff, but that's just some speculation based on the alliances that we're seeing here. The next one is the Insect Alliance. And despite, biologically speaking, some of these units are not really insects, I get where they're coming from. The developers are probably not keen on all of the very specific terminology. So the Insects is going to include 3 brand new units. We've got Nyx Assassin, Weaver, Sand King, who's an existing unit, and Broodmother. So whenever you get 3 of these insects, spiderlings will swarm the enemies from the edge of the board. Enemies bitten by these spiderlings will have a chance to miss their attacks. Presumably take damage too. It's not really clear, since, if you're getting bit by a spiderling, you probably take at least some small amount of damage. So we'll have to see exactly how this plays out in practice, because this is kind of vague. How many spiderlings, how fast, how much damage, what is the chance, and so on. So it's kind of hard to evaluate the power level of this. But this definitely seems like kind of a more accessory alliance. It's not really a primary one that you're going to build towards, like a warrior or a mage or a hunter. You can't really build your core around insects. It's probably just a nice to have once you already have another core in place. But let's talk about some of the new units that are in here. We've got Weaver, who is a tier 2, so 2-cost unit, Insect Hunter. And his ability is Shakuchi. I probably butchered that pronunciation. He shifts out of visibility, becoming untargetable and moving through targets, dealing damage to each enemy it passes. So this will, deal some type of an AoE effect, or, targeting multiple units. And that's something that not a lot of hunters have. Currently just Wind Ranger has, but Wind Ranger is also a tier 2 unit. So we'll have to see where where this fits in comparatively damage-wise to somebody like Wind Ranger, who I think would be the most direct competition in hunter builds because it's a tier 2 unit, and they also have like the insect tag, which maybe most hunters wouldn't want to go after because there's no other insect hunters. It's really hard to evaluate this based on just the speculation, but I think you'll just see additional competition for the hunter slot, primarily with somebody like Wind Ranger. Nyx Assassin is a tier 1 unit, so nice cheap 1 cost unit, an insect assassin, as the name implies, and has 2 abilities. Spiked Carapace, Nyx Assassin pops spikes out of its carapace, negating and reflecting damage, as well as stunning the source of the damage. So that's pretty interesting. You've got a tier 1 unit that can stun and can also reflect damage, so it's pretty resilient and kind of tanky. We'll have to see exactly the stats to see how much of a tank really Nyx Assassin becomes. Although, as an assassin, you wouldn't expect too terribly much tankiness. So maybe the abilities kind of make up for that. The other ability is Vendetta, which it seems like a passive ability. After teleporting, Nyx Assassin deals bonus damage on his next attack and applies Break to the enemy, which disables all of their passive effects. So another one of those disable passive effects, which we're going to see probably a lot more of because we're seeing more and more alliances added into the game. So on average, you're going to see more people completing bunches of different alliances. So negating that for some period of time is going to be more and more powerful. I also really like the design choice to kind of double down on what's unique about assassins. Assassins have this movement that is different than everybody else. They blink or they teleport or they jump, and that giving them some kind of ability to encourage that behavior I think is really good game design, and it really kind of doubles down on the interesting features of them. We saw that initially with Slark and his Pounce ability, and then they added it to Templar Assassin with the Meld ability after she teleports, and now we see it here with Nyx Assassin. So I'd like to see more and more of this added to the other assassins as well. Once again, it's a little hard to speculate without seeing exactly how strong Nyx Assassin will be, but you can definitely see him, if he's a good option, kind of competing with Bounty Hunter and Bloodseeker as kind of that one-cost assassin. Like most one-costs, though, he probably starts to fall off towards the late game unless this Vendetta effect and Spike Carapace really start to shine in that late game, where fights are super based around having powerful alliances and having powerful spells that Spike Carapace could maybe negate. The last one on this preview here is Broodmother. And Broodmother is a tier 4 unit. It's an insect warlock, and her ability is Broodmother spins a web on top of an enemy unit. Enemies in the web lose attack speed, movement speed, and cast speed. Presumably this web is more than just one square. It's probably a little bit bigger, so it can hit multiple enemies, but it will probably just initially target something like a Kunkka ult. I think the most common usage of Broodmother here, if she ends up being quite strong, is going to be something similar to Alchemist. We see the Warlock tag on a tier 4 unit, and typically you'll just want to throw that in just as another Warlock, kind of like you would use Alchemist right now. It'll be hard to tell whether this spin web is stronger than Alchemist's acid spray. So I think that would be the kind of position we'd see that. This is also meaning that as a tier 4 unit, it's going to be very powerful just at 2-star. We see that with most other tier 4 units. You don't really need to get them up to 3-star for them to be impactful in the game, in the late game. So I'm a little concerned that this is going to kind of double down on the strength and the power of like Warrior and Warlock builds, because you had another tier 4 Warlock. And so now we've got Necrophos, Alchemist, and now Broodmother. So we're going to see a lot of Warlocks into that late game situation. It's hard to see exactly how this is going to play out, but I'm very curious to see if that really does come true. In terms of the Insect Alliance overall, of course, I don't know how to evaluate its power level with kind of vague descriptions here, but I most likely see it fitting into Assassin builds. Because if you want to play Assassins, you're going to play Sand King, presumably he's still an Assassin, along with Nyx Assassin here. And that's already 2 out of the 3 there. So you'll need to add in either Weaver or Broodmother. More than likely you want Broodmother just because she's the higher cost unit and possibly has a higher utility. And then maybe you also want to throw in Alchemist as well as another Warlock to complete the Warlock bonus, but also because he has a good Armor Shred ability, which Assassins who mainly deal physical damage would very much like to see. So that's a little bit of speculation on those builds. But there's also part 2 that's been released, and that talks about the rest of the heroes. So let's go and take a look at that. So on part 2, which was just previewed just a few moments ago before I started recording this video, we see Bright front and center, Legion Commander and the brand new Champion Alliance. And I will tell you one thing, when I read the Champion Alliance and then Legion Commander, I literally jumped out of my chair in excitement, and like I was overwhelmed with how powerful it seems. So Legion Commander has the champion, which is just requires 1 unit, and says this champion receives all alliance bonuses. All of them. So you've got the warrior bonus. I assume this means all the ones that you have active. So if you have the warrior alliance, Legion Commander, it becomes a warrior and gains the bonus armor. If you have hunter, Legion Commander can attack multiple times. If you have a demon, she gets plus 50% pure damage. If you have demon hunter, becomes a demon hunter bonus. I guess that doesn't really help. But probably all those like primary ones. So I kind of mentioned what I think are the most powerful ones, the warrior, the hunter, and the demon ones, to apply to a non-warrior hunter demon. So let's actually take a look at what Legion Commander does, though. Legion Commander is a human champion, tier 3, so it's reasonably likely to get in the mid-game, or the early to mid-game. And her ability is Duel. Legion Commander targets the lowest health enemy, and they are forced to attack each other. Presumably it's kind of like a long-range taunt if they're out of range. If either hero dies during the duration, the hero winning the duel gains permanent bonus damage. And at that point, I was just like flabbergasted. Permanent bonus damage is so crazy. It's kind of just like Brawny's permanent bonus health. It just allows for this kind of infinite scaling. The longer the game goes, you just want to be beating up and winning duels over and over again. If you get ahead with Legion Commander, she could just get completely out of control, especially because she's going to have these alliance bonuses. You can give her the demon bonus, the warrior, the hunters, and she's just an unstoppable wrecking crew with bonus armor, attacking hard, has the demon alliance. I am really, really excited to try to see where you can fit Legion Commander in. I will say one thing. I feel like she's going to be a little bit too versatile. I feel like you're going to want to fit her into everything. Okay, maybe not mages, because she doesn't deal any magic damage, and the mage bonus doesn't really apply to her. But like she can go into knights, and she gets the knight bonus. She would also presumably count as a troll for the troll bonus and get the bonus of that. The higher bonus for being a troll. Presumably, I'm not positive on that. As well as plenty of other stuff. I guess would count as a warlock, so when she casts Duel, she makes a warlock link. It wouldn't count towards like completing the alliance, but would count as a warlock who cast a spell. So just all kinds of interesting possibilities that I find it really hard to speculate on, but I'm really excited to see where it goes. I think the best spot would probably be in a warrior hunter build, if you can throw in a demon as well, because that just ensures that she can complete as many duels as possible, and then more attacks is just going to be better and better. So probably something like a 3 warrior, 3 hunter build. All right, the last alliance we've got to preview here is the Brute Alliance. That also comes with 2 brand new units. So the Brute Alliance is a 2/4 unit alliance, and it comes with Axe, Treant Protector, and Doom, who we already have in the game, so a tier 1, a tier 3, and a tier 4, as well as 2 new units, Lifestealer and Magnus. Whenever a Brute attacks an enemy, they deal additional damage and apply a damage debuff. I don't know if that's a damage over time debuff or like a damage increase debuff or a damage like reduction, like we reduce their damage or they take more. It's kind of ambiguous, but this might just be like a dot, like a damage over time effect. Brutes prefer to attack enemies that do not have the debuff. So you're going to see Brutes like multi-targeting. They're going to attack, if they're surrounded by people, they're going to attack one and then the next and the next, just to spread this debuff around. So presumably that'll add a lot to their damage if it's a damage over time effect, which I kind of think it is. Let's take a look at the other units, the new units that are coming in. Lifestealer is a tier 1 unit, so nice cheap early game unit. He's a Heartless Brute, and that's another Heartless added to the early game, so you can much more easily get Heartless online along with something like Drow Ranger or Pudge. And his ability is Feast. Lifestealer's attacks damage enemies and heal him for a percentage of his target's maximum health. So he wants to be hitting the high health targets to be able to lifesteal more and more life away from them. And he's going to be multi-targeting people a lot because of the Brute Alliance. But what I'm most interested in is using him in kind of in combination with to get an early Heartless bonus, as well as the Brute, which is presumably going to deal physical damage, and just having a really powerful early game with a tier 1 unit. Let's talk about Magnus. The next Brute is a tier 2 unit, and he is a Shaman Brute, which is kind of an unusual combination. The Shamans are generally not very desirable in the game. The Alliance is like kind of meh. You know, you can get it, and it's not something you really set out to find. If you find it, you find it. His ability is Empower. Magnus enrages an ally, granting them damage and cleave temporarily. So some kind of short duration buff where that unit kind of goes berserk, gets a bunch of bonus damage, and then has cleave on their attacks. By being a tier 2 unit, I think Magnus, Lifestealer, and the whole Brute Alliance is going to be really focused on being an early game alliance, a strong early game, kind of like we saw old Savages, where they would apply a bleed effect, where that bleed was very powerful early on, but then it would kind of be less and less impactful later on. And that would be especially true if this damage debuff is a similar bleed type effect to the old Savage debuff. You also see that 4 of the 5 Brutes are all 1, 2, or 3 cost units. Only Doom is a higher tier. So definitely kind of doubling down on this early game power of Brutes. So I'd like to see builds that are going to incorporate something like Lifestealer plus maybe Pudge as kind of a Heartless core, and you've got Pudge as a good frontliner in the early game when you're at levels, say, 5 or 6. And then you pair it with, say, Treant Protector and Enchantress, 2 very good early game units to get the Druid, and then also complete at least tier 1 of the Brute Alliance. If Brutes end up being quite powerful, we can get up to 4 by throwing in Axe and Magnus, and then maybe instead of an extra Druid, and then you're probably looking for a Warrior to round out a tanky front line with 3 Warriors. I think that would be a very strong early game composition that could then build into various different things. If you want to get, say, more Hunters instead of some of the Brutes, you could replace, Lifestealer with Drow Ranger to get Heartless, or you could build back into more Warriors, going like Doom to maintain the Brute Alliance for a little bit longer. But unless they're like super overtuned, you really want to be transitioning away from the tier 1 and tier 2 units into the late game. Magnus, if you get him up to 3-star, would probably be really strong though, because this Empower would kind of reminds me of Ogre Magi's buff, where it's quite powerful when applied to units. Depends on how long temporarily is. But that would be very strong in the late game if you have a big hitter to give them cleave and just cleave through the enemy board. So that is all of the new units and new alliances coming to Dota Underlords in the big update, which we suspect is probably going to be next week, but they haven't announced an official date, but coming very soon. I'm really excited for all of these units, especially Legion Commander, so I hope you are too. Whenever they preview more of the mechanics, which should be coming soon, I'll tell you all about those in upcoming videos. So thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Make sure you like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.